Welcome to the Deconstructionist Deep Dive.
The podcast that doesn't just accept the story.
We break it
We examine the pieces.
and expose the machinery inside. Let's dive in.
What if everything about modern relationship advice, the red flags, the self-reflection, the endless compassion, isn't just wrong, but is designed to keep you in a state of self-policing isolation?
Okay, that's a hell of a question to start with. And yeah, that's exactly what we're diving into today.
Right.
We're looking at this whole framework, this way relationship advice has evolved, and specifically how control works now. We're aiming to show how all this focus on emotional management, the stuff everyone tells you is key,
Yeah.
how that's actually become, well, kind of a weapon.
Right. A tool.
Yeah, a tool.
Yeah.
We're tracing it basically from old school religious ideas straight through to today's therapy speak, mapping how managing your emotions becomes this subtle way of controlling people socially.
Keeping things in line.
Exactly. We want to cut through that noise, push back on the idea that it's always your fault, and really understand the machinery, how this advice actually works.
And the core idea we're pulling from our sources, the sort of ultimate synthesis here, it really boils down to one big deception.
Which is?
That relationship health is something you achieve on your own. Like, it's a solo project, a test you pass by managing yourself perfectly according to, whatever expert protocol is trending.
Checking all the boxes.
Precisely. But the reality, the thing this system tries really hard to hide is that relationships are messy. They're mutual. There's something you build together with another person. Context matters. It's co-creation.
But if you believe it's all on you,
then you're already isolated, aren't you? You're already set up to police yourself, looking inward instead of engaging with the actual dynamic.
Okay, right. So let's break this system down. Let's look at the pieces, the concepts, the rules that make up this toolkit of control. Starting with how outside authorities tell us what's good and bad. A, axioms of external authority. Objective standards.
Yeah.
First up, Node 1, objective red flags. We see these everywhere, don't we? Lists. Lists of universal warning signs that supposedly tell you instantly if a relationship is, quote, toxic.
The implication is crystal clear. There's one fixed standard approved by experts, and if your partner or the dynamic doesn't match up,
Then they are wrong.
Yeah.
Objectively. Problem solved.
But think about what that does immediately. It shifts the power dramatically.
Yeah.
These universal red flags give instant authority to, well, whoever made the list. Experts, influencers, online gurus.
Doesn't matter who, really.
Doesn't matter. They become the diagnosticians, and this whole process, it doesn't just categorize, it actively pathologizes anything different. It takes the huge complexity of human connection and just flattens it into a checklist.
Yeah, and the danger there, the vulnerability for you, the listener, is huge. If you're just relying on some external list, you stop trusting your own gut feeling, right?
Right.
Your own judgment about your specific situation.
Absolutely. That's the key vulnerability the sources point out. This whole idea ignores culture. It ignores individual personalities. It ignores the history of that specific relationship. Queer theory talks about amitone normativity.
Explain that quickly.
It's the assumption that there's only one right way for relationships to be, usually, monogamous, long-term, maybe marriage-focused. So when advice says this is a red flag, often it's just enforcing that very narrow, traditional, often quite privileged view.
While pretending to be objective.
Exactly. And anthropology shows us relationships look wildly different across cultures. But the red flag doctrine, it needs uniformity. It needs everyone marching to the same beat to keep the advice givers in charge.
Okay, so that's controlling the definitions, but then it gets personal. It moves inside. Node 4, the invalid feelings doctrine. This one's marked high priority in our source material. Why?
Because it's foundational. This is the idea, the outright claim that your emotional responses, your gut reaction, your hurt, your anger, whatever it is, can actually be wrong, epistemically invalid.
Okay, epistemically invalid. Break that down. What does that mean in plain English?
It means the knowledge you get from that feeling. It's dismissed as false, irrelevant. The doctrine tells you that feeling you have, that's not useful information. That's a glitch, a mistake.
Oh.
It's what we call epistemic gaslighting. So you feel anxious after talking to your partner. The system jumps in and says, oh, that's your trigger. That's your unresolved stuff. You need to work on your coping skills. It never considers that maybe, just maybe, you're anxious because something genuinely unsafe or unfair just happened.
So instead of reacting, you immediately turn inward. What's wrong with me that I feel this way?
That's it, exactly. It completely colonizes your internal world. It cuts the wires between what's happening out there and what your body is telling you in here. And suddenly you need someone else, an expert, to tell you if your feelings are okay. You can't trust yourself to set boundaries because your own alarm system has been labeled faulty.
And someone who doubts their own gut.
Is very, very easy to manage. That's why it's so fundamental to this control system. B, weapons of individualization and blame shift.
Right. Which leads us straight into the next set of tools.
Mm-hmm.
The ones designed to make systemic issues look like your personal failings. The weapons of individualization and blame shift.
Mm-hmm.
Let's take node 3, the favorite weapon concept. This is where they label your go-to defensive move. Maybe you shut down, maybe you get passive-aggressive, maybe you withdraw as inherently bad, pathological even.
Yeah, and this is pure blame shifting 101. Let's paint a picture. Partner A keeps dismissing partner B over and over. Partner B feels totally shut down, unsafe, so they withdraw.
Yeah.
Give the silent treatment.
Yeah.
Now, the advice industry, using this favorite weapon idea, zooms right in on partner B's silence. Oh, the silent treatment, that's toxic communication. You need to fix that.
Ignoring why partner B shut down in the first place.
Completely ignoring the initial dismissal, the hurt that caused the reaction. All the blame lands on the reaction, not the action that triggered it.
So it makes you feel ashamed for protecting yourself. It frames legitimate self-defense as a character flaw.
Exactly. It takes a relational dynamic problem and boils it down to your individual psychology. And it works so well because, let's be honest, everyone has defense mechanisms. Everyone has a pattern. By pointing out your weapon, they keep you busy fixing yourself.
Instead of demanding change or safety from the person or situation causing the problem.
You got it. Keeps you spinning your wheels internally.
Okay, another huge one here, node 5, communication primacy. The idea that poor communication is the root of all evil in relationships. Not abuse, not inequality, not fundamental incompatibility, just bad communication.
This is such a classic way the system individualizes structural issues. You're told constantly if you just use I feel statements correctly, or if you just practice active listening, or, have you tried scheduling a weekly check-in?
Right, the communication fixes.
Yeah. And it demands enormous amounts of emotional labor, usually more from the person with less power in the relationship. And crucially, it lets everyone ignore the real material power imbalances.
Give an example of that. How does perfect communication fail if the structure is unfair?
Okay. Imagine one partner controls all the money, or one partner does, say, 90% of the housework and childcare and, remembering birthdays.
The mental load.
The whole mental load, exactly. In that situation, right. No amount of beautifully phrased I feel statements from the overloaded partner is going to magically fix that imbalance. What's needed is a structural change, shared finances, fair division of labor.
But the advice focuses on the talking.
Right. The source material argues this keeps you stuck on this exhausting treadmill of processing feelings and talking, when the real issue is the unfair structure. By saying, it's just communication, the person holding the power gets to keep things exactly as they are.
Okay, quick detour node 2, toxic label overuse. This is something critics sometimes throw back, right? That people are just labeling everything toxic these days, confusing real abuse with, normal arguments.
Yeah, our sources call this out as basically a semantic game. It functions like a straw man fallacy, really.
How so?
It sets up this false choice. Either it's horrific abuse or it's totally fine, normal conflict. By complaining about overuse of the word toxic, they try to water down the language we need to actually call out genuinely harmful stuff.
So it protects bad behavior.
Ultimately, yes. It makes the person raising concerns sound like they're being dramatic or overly sensitive. It's a tactic to muddy the waters, to make clear judgment harder. It's designed to baffle you. See requirements of isolation and austerity.
Okay, let's move to the tools that keep you separate, keep you detached. Node 6. The post-breakup contact prohibition. The rule that says, after a breakup, you must cut all contact, no exceptions, for healing.
This is a pretty straightforward behavioral rule, isn't it? But look what it does. It forces emotional isolation, and it promotes this really black and white thinking about people.
Either they're perfect and in your life, or they're toxic and completely cut off.
Exactly. There's no room for nuance, no possibility for, say, amicable co-parenting, or maybe even finding a way to be friends later, or just getting complex closure. It just slams the door shut.
Yeah.
It denies that relationships, even broken ones, can evolve or exist in different forms. Clean break, controlled severance.
And then there's node 8. This one feels really subtle but powerful. The trust formula redefinition, how trust gets twisted.
This one is insidious. It redefines trust away from relational reliability, trusting the other person to be decent or dependable, to trusting yourself, trusting your own resilience. The new mantra becomes something like, I don't need to trust them not to hurt me. I just trust myself to handle it when they inevitably do.
Wow. That's bleak.
It's the absolute peak of emotional hyper-individualism. It basically tells you to build this tough outer shell, this emotional austerity, preemptive detachment. Don't get vulnerable. Just be ready to bounce back alone.
So you replace actual connection, which requires vulnerability.
With self-sufficiency. It's a defense mechanism against ever needing anyone, which keeps you isolated. And frankly, that suits a hyper-competitive, individualistic society perfectly, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does. Okay, we've laid out the toolkit. Now let's get the scalpel out and really dissect the 3 ideas that do the most damage to your ability to trust yourself. Right, we're honing in now on the core mechanisms, the ones that attack your self-knowledge, your self-trust, your ability to protect yourself. A, deception 1, the invalid feelings myth, epistemic gaslighting. So we said the source of power is the therapeutic industry, and the cost is huge. Self-alienation, losing touch with your own intuition. Can you walk us through how this epistemic gaslighting actually feels like in a real situation?
Okay, yeah. Imagine you have a conversation, maybe an argument with your partner. Afterwards, you feel tense, anxious, maybe a bit sick to your stomach. That's your body's response, right?
Okay.
So you try to talk about it and say, hey, when that happened, I felt really anxious. And your partner, maybe repeating advice they've picked up, says something like, sounds like you got triggered. That sounds like your old stuff coming up. You should probably journal about that or regulate yourself.
Instantly shifting the focus.
Instantly. It's no longer about what happened in the conversation. Maybe they were genuinely dismissive. Maybe they crossed a boundary. No, it's about your internal state being faulty.
That's the gaslighting.
That's the epistemic gaslighting in action. Your genuine feeling anxiety, which is data gets relabeled as a defect, a trigger, your problem to solve. You're pushed to doubt the knowledge coming from your own body. Your gut says warning, but the advice says ignore that, it's just a projection. You do that enough times.
You stop trusting the gut entirely.
You become alienated from your own experience. You start needing an external expert to decode your feelings for you. Is this anxiety real, or am I just triggered?
That's incredibly damaging.
Yeah.
If evolution gave us fear to keep us safe, what's the pushback? How do we resist this pressure to invalidate our own internal compass?
There are some really strong counterarguments. First, feminist standpoint theory. It argues powerfully that your lived experience is a valid source of knowledge. Your viewpoint from where you stand has inherent value. An expert looking in from the outside can't just dismiss that.
Right. Your feeling is real because you're feeling it.
Exactly. And we need to ground the emotion itself. The source material brings up the James Lange theory of emotion.
How does that help?
It basically says emotions aren't just like mental fluff, they're physiological responses first. Your body reacts, heart races, stomach clenches, then you label that feeling fear or anger. So the feeling isn't a flaw, it's data. It's your body giving you actionable information.
Like a dashboard light in a car?
Perfect analogy. If the oil light comes on, you don't yell at the car for overreacting. The light is information. Fear is information. Boundary crossed. Danger present. Anger is information. Injustice occurred. Labeling that data a trigger or a projection is like telling the driver to ignore the dashboard and just keep driving.
Until you crash.
Until you crash. And then there's phenomenology, which just emphasizes the absolute primacy of your subjective experience. If you're constantly told your inner reality is wrong, you can't build genuine meaning or authentic connection. Honoring what you know to be true inside yourself is the only way. B. Deception 2. The infinite self-reflection mandate. Recursive gaslighting.
Okay, deception number 2. Node 10. The infinite self-reflection mandate. This is the idea that you have this constant, unending duty to look inward, examine your part in every problem, find your flaw, fix yourself. Always look at yourself first. Now, wait a minute. Isn't self-reflection good? Don't we need that?
Oh, absolutely. Reflection is healthy. But the key words here are infinite and mandate. Where it crosses the line, according to this framework, is when it becomes compulsory and never-ending, and it never actually leads to self-acceptance or clear action. It just loops.
Recursive gaslighting.
Exactly. Because if every single conflict, every single hurt, requires you to start by dissecting your own contribution, your own flaws, well, the system guarantees you're at least partly guilty, right?
Yeah.
Always responsible, even for your own mistreatment.
Which benefits?
Control systems love it. It keeps you stuck, paralyzed, looking inward, and it makes you completely dependent on external validation because you're never fixed. You're never done. There's always more reflection needed, always more work to do on yourself. So you always need the expert or the partner to tell you if you're doing it right.
This sounds disturbingly like Older forms of control. Religious ones, maybe?
You nailed it. And this is where bringing in someone like Foucault is really helpful. His analysis shows how this mirrors historical technologies of the self, particularly confession.
Like Catholic confession.
Exactly. Or Puritan self-scrutiny. The demand was constant self-examination, constant searching for sin, constant reporting to an authority. The goal was the same: turn your inner life into a space that could be managed and policed.
By making you police yourself.
Precisely. You become your own prison guard, constantly monitoring your thoughts, feelings, reactions. It's exhausting. It drains the energy you need for actual change, for setting boundaries, for taking decisive action to protect yourself. All that energy goes into endless internal auditing.
It's the opposite of being present and responsive, isn't it?
Yeah.
The source material contrasts this with ideas from, like, Taoism and Zen.
Right. Concepts like Wu Wei, which is sort of like effortless, spontaneous action, acting without getting bogged down in self-consciousness.
Right.
Or the Zen idea of the beginner's mind seeing things freshly without dragging all your past baggage and analysis into every single moment.
If you're constantly stopping to ask, wait, is this feeling a trigger? Is this reaction my favorite weapon?
Mm-hmm.
You can't act authentically.
You can't. You're paralyzed by the analysis. The mandate for infinite reflection kills genuine in-the-moment responsiveness. It replaces it with guarded, hesitant, pre-analyzed actions that are ultimately dependent on external approval. You're too busy policing your inner world to clearly see what's happening outside. C. Deception 3. The compassion imperative, moral coercion.
Okay, third major deception, node 9. The compassion imperative. This is the big one about virtue. The idea that you must always approach your partner and any conflict with boundless compassion, no matter what they did, no matter how much it hurt.
Yeah, this gets framed as the highest moral ground, doesn't it? But it's often weaponized, especially in dynamics where there's an imbalance of power or outright abuse. It becomes a form of moral coercion.
And the cost is?
Massive. It demands self-betrayal. It leads to incredibly rapid boundary erosion. Because if you're morally obligated to be compassionate above all else, you essentially silence your own legitimate judgment, your right to be angry, your need to protect yourself. How can you critique or set a firm boundary if you're first required to feel empathy for the person harming you?
Why does the system push this so hard? Why demand compassion even when someone is clearly causing harm?
This really gets to the heart of it. Let's bring in Nietzsche. He talked about the difference between master morality and slave morality. Master morality values things like strength, self-respect, honesty, things that serve the thriving individual or group. Slave morality, he argued, arises from the resentment of the less powerful, and it flips morality on its head. It values things like humility, pity, and crucially, endless forgiveness.
So endless compassion is slave morality.
In this context, yes. Especially when it connects to Node 7, forgiveness as absolution. This pressure for immediate unconditional forgiveness and compassion serves the offender far more than the person who was hurt. It lets them off the hook, avoids accountability, and pressures the injured party to smooth things over for the sake of the relationship's stability, rather than seeking actual justice or healing for themselves.
It shortcuts the whole process.
Completely. It prevents necessary confrontation. So, compassion without discernment isn't virtuous. It's often just self-sacrifice dressed up in moral language.
Which means we have to talk about anger.
Yeah.
Because the system hates anger, labels it toxic, a failure of emotional regulation.
Absolutely vital point. We need feminist anger theory here. It reclaims anger, righteous anger not as a personal failing, but as crucial political and relational information. Anger tells you an injustice has happened. It signals a boundary has been violated.
It's fuel.
It's the fuel for change, the engine for boundary setting. Drawing on thinkers like Fanon in Decolonization, the idea is you don't owe empathy to your oppressor. Compassion needs wisdom. It needs context. If you apply it blindly, especially when you're being harmed, you just erase yourself. Your anger is valid. It's necessary.
Okay, we've pulled apart the key components of high-leverage deceptions. Now let's zoom out. Let's connect these dots and see the bigger picture, the systemic architecture, and how we got here. A power beneficiary analysis.
Right, because the crucial question is always, cui bono? Who benefits when people buy into these ideas? The power flow tells you the function.
So the invalid feelings doctrine. Who benefits most when you doubt your own gut?
Well, the therapeutic expert class, primarily. If your feelings aren't reliable data, you need a professional to interpret them for you, right? Ensures repeat business, constant consultation.
Makes sense. And the infinite self-reflection mandate, always looking inward, blaming yourself.
Huge win for abusive partners. It's the perfect tool for blame shifting. This fight wouldn't have happened if you weren't so triggered. Deflect, deflect, deflect.
And the compassion imperative, Be nice, be understanding no matter what.
That serves any system that requires people to be docile, to not rock the boat. And on a personal level, it's a gift to emotional predators. They rely on their targets feeling morally obligated to stay, to forgive, to keep giving chances. If you think leaving is a failure of compassion, they've got you trapped.
Wait, here's the really interesting one for me. The trust formula redefinition. Trusting your resilience, not their reliability. How does that benefit hyper-individualist capitalism? That connection seems less obvious.
Think about what that mindset encourages. It says, you're on your own, emotionally. You don't need reliable people or strong community bonds. You just need to be tough enough to handle the inevitable letdowns.
The rugged individual, emotionally speaking.
Exactly. It makes you the perfect unit for a precarious economy. You're a self-contained emotional survivor, responsible only for yourself. You don't need interdependence. You don't need collective support, just personal resilience. It perfectly mirrors the economic message. You're solely responsible for your success or failure. It privatizes everything, even emotional well-being. B, historical parallels analysis.
It really feels like none of this is truly new, just repackaged.
Yeah.
Can you trace that historical line for us? How did these old control ideas morph into modern advice?
Oh, the lineage is pretty clear when you look. The control technology updates, but the underlying structure, often the same. Take Puritan self-examination, that obsessive, guilt-ridden, constant checking of your thoughts and deeds to prove you were saved. That maps almost directly onto the modern self-reflection mandate. The goalposts shift from proving spiritual purity to achieving emotional health, but the mechanism. That constant internal audit, looking for flaws, identical.
And the need to confess those flaws.
That's the pipeline from Catholic confession straight into therapeutic disclosure. The requirement to reveal your innermost thoughts and feelings to an external authority figure. It just transitioned. The authority figure changed from priest to therapist or coach, maybe, but the act of externalizing your inner life for judgment and correction. Same core function. It stops you from defining your own sense of rightness.
And the pressure to just endure bad treatment quietly.
That echoes Victorian morality, doesn't it? The emphasis on keeping a stiff upper lip, suffering politely, maintaining appearances. That laid the groundwork for the modern compassion imperative. It becomes virtuous to absorb harm, to be the bigger person rather than express anger or create disruption. Submitting is reframed as maturity. See critique of discerning judgment.
Okay, let's look at two more nodes that seem designed specifically to keep you stuck, unable to make clear decisions. Node 11, the command to choose curiosity over judgment.
Right. This tells you, don't rush to judge the situation or the person. Stay curious. Explore the dynamic, which sounds open-minded, right?
Sounds reasonable, yeah.
Yeah, but the deconstruction argues it's a trap. It pathologizes the essential act of discernment, of making a judgment call about safety or health or compatibility. If you're always supposed to be curious, you never get to actually decide. You're stuck investigating forever.
Analysis paralysis.
Exactly, a paralysis of discernment. It keeps you hooked, examining the fascinating dynamic instead of making a necessary boundary or exit.
And this works hand in glove with Node 12, the vulnerability requirement. The idea that vulnerability is always good, always required for intimacy.
And again, yes, healthy connection involves risk. It involves vulnerability. Martin Buber's I-thou idea, meeting the other authentically. But this advice often pushes vulnerability as a blanket requirement, regardless of whether safety has been established.
So you end up disclosing sensitive stuff to people who haven't earned that trust.
Which creates huge potential for exploitation. Our analysis draws on care ethics here, which stresses that vulnerability must be balanced with risk assessment. You have to gauge safety. Just opening up without that discernment isn't building intimacy. Sometimes it's just handing someone ammunition to hurt you later. The system pushes disclosure prematurely, undermining your right to judge who is actually worthy of your trust.
Okay. We spent a lot of time taking apart the machine, exposing how it isolates you, polices you. Now, the crucial part, building the resistance. What are the counter ideas, the alternative ways of thinking that liberate you from this system, the counter axioms?
Yes, moving from critique to empowerment.
Number one, we propose feelings as data. Simple, powerful. We reject the invalid feelings myth completely. Your emotions, all of them are valid. They are essential information about what you need, where your boundaries are, what you value. Trust your internal dashboard first.
Number two, contextual discernment. We ditch the universal rules. Judgment isn't the enemy, lazy or biased judgment is. We need discernment, but it has to be specific to the situation. You look at the context, the history, the power dynamics. You don't just apply a generic checklist.
3. Righteous boundaries. We need to reclaim self-protection as a virtue, not a pathology. Setting a boundary isn't being difficult or unloving. It's an act of self-respect, of integrity. It's saying, this is where I stand.
4. Relational mutuality. Healthy relationships are a two-way street. They require shared responsibility, shared effort. We reject the idea that one person has to carry all the emotional load or offer endless, unreciprocated compassion. If it's not mutual, it's not healthy, period.
And number 5, embodied trust. Yes, real connection needs vulnerability, but, and this is the crucial part, must be paired with discernment, with that careful risk assessment. Vulnerability has to be earned by the other person's consistent actions, not demanded up front by some external rulebook.
Okay, those are the core principles. But how do we make these real? What are the practical, everyday resistance tools people can actually use?
Good question.
First tool, epistemic reclamation. This is the active practice of trusting your own internal data, your gut feelings, your emotional responses, even when, especially when, an external source tells you you're wrong or triggered. It's consciously choosing to believe yourself, reclaiming the authority of your own experience.
Second, structural analysis. This is about training yourself when conflict happens to look outward first, not always inward. Ask, what are the power dynamics here? What systemic factors are at play? What's the context? Before you automatically jump to, what did I do wrong?
Third, boundary literacy. This takes conscious practice, learning to tell the difference between a healthy, flexible boundary set in the present moment to protect your values and a rigid, reactive defense mechanism triggered by past trauma. Healthy boundaries serve you. Rigid defenses often isolate you unnecessarily. Knowing the difference gives you power.
And finally, the ultimate tool, relational sovereignty.
Yes. This is your fundamental right to choose, to define what a successful, healthy connection looks like for you, to choose relationship models that actually align with your well-being and values, whether they fit the mainstream mold or not. You are the authority in your own relational life.
So the liberation imperative, the final takeaway.
It's about dismantling that internal surveillance system.
Rejecting the therapeutic panopticon, that feeling you're always being watched, judged, assessed by yourself and others according to these rules. That's what turns advice into self-policing.
And the call to action is this. Reclaim your knowing. Reclaim your feelings as valid knowledge. Reclaim your right to judge, to discern safety from danger, and reclaim your absolute authority to define what connection means for you in your life on your terms.
And that's our deep dive for this week.
Remember, the most dangerous illusion is the one you don't know you're in.
But now you know. So here's our question for you. Where in your own life have you accepted that your feelings are invalid because it was easier than trusting your own gut? Let us know in the comments. Question the narrative. Deconstruct the dogma. See the system.
We'll see you next time. Stay skeptical.
Thank you for joining us.